Unit D, Part 1. And the first question says, the double bar graph shows the number of male and female athletes at a university over a 4-year period. Compare the trend in the number of male athletes during the 4-year period and the trend in the number of female athletes during the 4-year period. And as you can see by your sheet, the number of male athletes increases from 86 through 89, whereas the number of female athletes increases to 88 and then falls off in 89. And that's the corresponding answer is C on your worksheet, C. Now the next one, a parcel delivery service lowered its prices and finds that it has delivered twice as many parcels this year as it did last year. To illustrate this fact, the manager draws a pictogram as shown below. Each cube depicts a parcel. The side length of the parcel on the right is twice the side length of the parcel on the left. Why is this pictogram misleading? What visual impression is portrayed by the pictogram? Well, here's our smaller cube, and the length of every side is L. In our larger cube, we've doubled the length of every side, but if the volume of the smaller cube is L cubed, if you cube 2, you get 8. So the volume of the larger cube is 8L cubed. So the error is this hasn't been doubled. It has increased in size, in volume by a factor of 8. So here's another possible answer. The volume of the cube on the right is 8 times, not twice, the volume of the cube on the left. The pictogram gives the visual impression that 8 times as many parcels were delivered this year as last year. Now let's look at number 3. And for 3, choose the one, use the graph to answer the question. In what quarter was the revenue the greatest for 1999? And clearly, looking at the graph, it's the 4th quarter, and that choice is B. For number 4, use the graph to answer the question. In which year was the total volume of Danny's investments the greatest? Well, this chart shows that the peak occurs in 1995, the highest point on this graph, which approaches $8,000, occurred in 1995, and that choice is C. So, now let's go on to question 5. And for question 5, the graph below shows estimated world population for the period from 4000 BC to 2000 AD. Note that the logarithm of the world population and not the actual population is plotted on the vertical axis. This means, for example, that when the graph reaches 7 on the vertical axis, the world population is 10 to the 7th. That's 10 million. And when the when the graph reaches 9 on the vertical scale, the world population is 10 to the 9th, which is 1 billion. And so the question is, why must the graph be interpreted with care? Well, because this doesn't mean our population was, for example, something less than 7 million or something approaching 9 million. This is 10 to the 7th, which is 10 million, and 10 to the 9th, which is a billion. If the graph is not interpreted with care, what misleading impression might one have of world population during the period 4000 BC to 2000 AD? Well, as we just pointed out, it would look like the world population increased by a factor much smaller than what it actually did. Why do you think that the graph was presented in this form? Well, it was presented in this form because had we actually shown a difference in terms of millions, it would be somewhat unreadable. This series of segments joined together would be extremely steep and hard to graph. But if we interpret it in terms of logarithms, then it's much more visually available. So let's see what the another answer for this is. The graph must be interpreted with care because each tick mark on the vertical axis represents a tenfold increase in population. If the graph is not interpreted with care, one might have the impression that the world population increased at a linear rate between 4000 BC and 1000 AD. The graph is presented in this form because the data ranges over a large range of values. Population has grown so rapidly in recent years that an ordinary scale makes it impossible to see any detail in the early years shown on the graph. Now let's go on to 5. What did we just do? I beg your pardon, we're doing 6, yes. Anyhow, in which year, by the way, this is the growth of the annual growth rate. This is a graph not of growth, but of growth rate. And in which year during the period 1960 to 2010 is estimated world population the greatest? Well, the rate of growth may have been very sharp here, but nevertheless it's growing all the time. So the largest world population occurred right here at 2010. And so there we have it, 2010, which is C. Now let's do 7. And for question 7, the table below gives information about U.S. families with children under the age of 18. The table shows the percentage of these families that are two-parent families, the percentage that are maintained by a single mother, and the percentage that are maintained by a single father. And here's our data. And now, here's one way to graph that data. We could let the single fathers be the blanks. And notice the percentage of single fathers is rather slight in each year compared to the black, which are the single mothers, and they're a little larger. And then on top of those, we have in gray the two-parent families and the percentage of those. So we could say, well, it looks like the percentage of single-parent families grew until 1996 and then stayed somewhat the same. Not quite, but somewhat. Anyhow, the graph displays the three categories in proportion. There was a steady decrease in two-parent families from 81 to 2002. So that takes care of